Today, I'm super excited to bring a fellow innovator within the restoration tech ecosystem, Mr. Kevin Dooley. How's it going, Kevin?
Hey, thanks for having me, buddy. Good, you?
The thesis I have is that 80% dry logs are just absolute BS. There's just capturing all this data, all the data is messed up. These are getting sent to the insurance companies. The insurance companies have all these reviewers that are tearing this up and making decisions, and it just seems all broken.
Yeah.
Do you agree or disagree?
Might be a little bit of a controversial statement, but I'd say 100% or darn near 100% of all readings are inaccurate. With inaccurate readings, how do you drive process, workflow, transparency, predictability, and consistent outcomes? But 100% of the remote data collection tools that are out there right now, their readings are not accurate across the full spectrum of temp and RH. So how do you start to drive workflow on these data collection tools that people are supposed to be trusting when they're not even accurate in the first place? There's definitely a hankering for how to fix it, but most people just seem to get up in arms and let's rebel. And that's not the solution. I do think technology will be the enabler, but there needs to be, I believe, a standardization on how the data gets collected. There needs to be transparency around the validation of the data.
Welcome, everybody, to the Albee After Hours podcast, where we talk about propelling the restoration industry forward. My name is Alex Studa, and today I'm super excited to bring a fellow innovator within the restoration tech ecosystem, somebody I would consider an equal in values and also how we see the change that needs to happen within restoration, Mr. Kevin Dooley. How's it going, Kevin?
Hey, thanks for having me, buddy. Good, you?
Thanks for coming out to Scottsdale, and thanks for spending some time podcasting it up here.
Yeah, cool. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So, Kevin, I want to dive right into the meat and potatoes. I know our viewers are really waiting for this, and the thesis I have is that 80%, or actually maybe even more, of dry logs are just absolute BS. There's just, we're capturing all this data, all the data is messed up. Like, I've seen graphs of all shapes and sizes on people's dry log reports. These are getting sent to the insurance companies. The insurance companies have all these reviewers that are tearing this up and making decisions, and it just seems all broken.
Yeah.
Do you agree or disagree?
Might be a little bit of a controversial statement, but I'd say 100% or darn near 100% of all readings are inaccurate. And so with inaccurate readings, how do you drive process, workflow, transparency, predictability, and consistent outcomes, as I have been sharing lately?
And what's the issue? What's the core root cause? Do we not have the ability to capture this data? Is it a technician training problem? Is it a business management problem? Where's the root of that?
There's a couple of buckets. So you have the industry, generally speaking, whoever's the procurement department of a restoration business are selecting inadequate hygrometers, as an example, that often are just, they're not accurate in their data collection. That's one. So hardware selection. Two, even if you were using a Vaisala, which is what I recommend to all restorers to use, you then run the risk of the technician not allowing it to calibrate, taking enough time to take the readings, recalibrating that meter, per manufacturer spec. So there's the human element as well. And then from a remote monitoring perspective, I'm going to be coming out with some interesting data in the coming weeks ahead, but 100% of the remote data collection tools that are out there right now, their readings are not accurate across the full spectrum of temp and RH. So how do you start to drive workflow on these data collection tools that people are supposed to be trusting when they're not even accurate in the first place?
So you're telling me, like, if we're going to look at the history of the industry, back in the day, restorers and adjusters were friends. A check was just cut. There was no need for dry logs, stuff like that. Now we got technical to solve the problem of, hey, maybe we're paying a little too much. So the insurance companies added all these layers of auditing, and the contractors now added all these layers of data collection. And for every technician, now we need a person in the office to compile all this stuff. And we're sitting here running around in circles over all this data, auditing it with the efforts to make the claims process more accurate. but it's garbage in, garbage out, and we have this
Yep.
entire just gloat sitting in the insurance ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the way it is. It's where everyone, it's a reoccurring theme at every conference I go to, reading the threads on the daily and the social media posts. There's a constant struggle between us and them, we'll call it. And there's definitely a hankering for how to fix it, but most people just seem to like get up in arms and let's rebel. And that's not the solution. From my perspective, it's going to be a process. It's going to take some time. I do think technology will be the enabler, but there needs to be, I believe, a standardization on how the data gets collected. There needs to be transparency around the validation of the data, right? And once we can provide confidence and trust in said data, then we can start to move the needle from the perspective of remote monitoring, as an example, which is an area that I'm playing in and getting deep into, and I think can be the pointy end of the stick to start building what I call transparency, trust, and predictability and consistent outcomes. And when you look at the water damage industry, which is, would you say it's about 2/3 of claims, property claims?
Yeah.
Ish.
Yeah.
So you look at that.
Well, and even fires include some sort of water damage.
For sure.
So, yeah.
For sure. But, from a drying perspective, it's, 60 odd %.
Yep.
And then you look at the water damage claim in itself. I think it's fair to say, would you agree, about 25-ish% of the cost is centered around equipment?
Yeah, I mean, with the most efficient companies, it's even higher. It's
Could
even
be.
up to 50%.
Absolutely. But like, it's a generalization, kind of average.
Absolutely.
It's probably about that today.
Yep.
Perhaps it'll increase. I think it will increase in the future, perhaps. But even as it is, even at a quarter, when you start to look at, just in the States alone, there's somewhere to the tune of, 4.5 million residential water damage claims a year, not including cats, not including commercial. Do that math at an average of, would you say, about $15K for a water damage claim?
Yep.
So you start talking about equipment, you're talking mega billions in dollars. And so that's a pretty pointy and sharp edge on the equation, if you will, or in the negotiation or the fight or whatever you want to call it, between us and them. And so in saying all that and understanding the economics of it all, and then relating that back to this conversation on data and data collection, the industry, as it relates to equipment sizing and how a restorer goes about sizing projects, everyone quotes S500, and frankly, this isn't a slap at the S500 or the ISRC even. It's just, it doesn't go far enough on how to properly size a job from a dehumidification drying perspective. Their mover calculations are even off base. But when you look at from a dehumidification perspective first, they go through these very basic calculations, but that's frankly bullshit. So without getting too deep on this, unless you want to, we can look at the exact make and model of a dehumidifier. It has a compressor in there that has a certain size of BTUs capacity to take the air that's in the space the dehumidifier is running in, run it through its system, reach dew point so that it drips water off the coils, collects in a bucket, and drips out. There's only a certain amount of capacity, BTUs, that thing can produce. That's how you measure the performance of a dehumidifier. Any make and model. Same with a desiccant. Size of the wheel, how much can that desiccant absorb in an hour or 24-hour period. And it's pure math based on the environment it's pulling the water from. It's not some class divided by 60, whatever the heck that ridiculous formula is. And so and based on AHAM and all that mumbo jumbo BS, it has to be for that moment in time, and as it's progressing every hour within the job. And so how do you go about doing that? And how do you create consistency? And how do owners or restoration technicians provide that and create an environment where they can run this complex algorithms and math. It's frankly not scalable. So we need technology in order to help the front line drive decision making at the very onset of the loss, and then drive decision making as the loss continues on. And the only way it can be done at a scalable level, on a consistent level, on a level that can be trusted across all stakeholders, is through the data collection tool. So that's remote monitoring.
Got it.
And so from a remote monitoring perspective, what we've been doing, we actually failed. So if I may, for a quick sec,
Yeah.
I was supposed to launch Kahi monitoring at the big flood when I flooded my building in Toronto last year. And then there were some UI UX problems I didn't like when we were running through it, and we were kind of ahead of our skis a little bit. So we backed out, fixed those things. And then we went down to Chuck and Chris's commercial drying event at the E3 Academy in the summer. And us, along with some of my competitors, had our remote monitoring setups there. And through that whole process, we were measuring our stuff against the Visalas, and we noticed some anomalies in the readings. And then, long story short, took it back to my team. I'm like, what the F is going on? So I got to fix it. So having integrity, like I have a ton of integrity. I want to do the right thing for the industry. As you know me, like I have a passion for this thing. And so all that to say is since basically July up until this very moment, we're still doing it. We've been running tests with the government of Canada, our version of US DARPA, as well as an independent testing lab that has a chamber that produces precise humidity and temperature conditions. And we ran our equipment through the gauntlet from all temperature zones, from -20 to 150, 60 Fahrenheit, from 0 to 100% RH, the whole way through, and started testing our stuff rigorously to figure out what the heck is going on. And then in doing so, we started looking at other stuff as well. And that's where my statements come from.
Got it.
And so now we solved that.
That's exciting.
So
before we get into the solution, because I know we're getting closer and closer to the solution, I see a lot of passion, a lot of geekiness, right? And you've done a lot for the industry, including the big flood and such, but a lot of our users probably don't, or a lot of our viewers probably don't know your story. How in the world did you get into restoration? You know, why you're so passionate and geeky over air movers and dehumidifiers and BTUs, and also like why you have the right to comment on the IICRC and on all these things, because I think there's some interesting stats there. So would you mind sharing?
Yeah. So like I've been in the industry since I was a kid. My dad was a restorer. He ran a franchise for several years, then went independent. And then when he got out of the contracting business, he teamed up with Dry-Ease and Claude Blackburn at the time and helped co-develop Dry Zone, which is now known as ASD.
Wow. Okay.
So he was at the very, very forefront of the development of the ASD program.
This was the first time.
This is back in 1998.
WRT before it, and this was like the second.
Yeah, I don't want to speak out of I don't want to
methodology.
speak out of turn. I'm pretty sure WRT would have been there at that time, obviously, because it was a precursor to ASD. But yeah, I suspect that was the case. And then moving beyond that, like, so I was on the flood trucks as a kid, you know, with him, summer, March break, spring breaks, weekends, etc. And then I got into college, used that as my theme, you know, for all my projects. And then I came out of college, I'm like, okay, well, got this business plan. What now? What am I doing? Hell, might as well just keep on the train. So I went to go work for an independent for a few years, did some estimating, project managing. My dad at that point went independent instructor and now was teaching throughout Canada and the US. And I would help him organize classes in hotels and conference centers. And through all that, I was networking with restorers, organizing and facilitating catering and all that logistical stuff to help my dad. And in those interactions and conversations, I started to realize back in the early 2000s that there was an underserved market in supporting restoration contractors with drying, rental, complex loss, like that kind of stuff. And so I ended up creating a business, started in my mom's garage. Shout out to Phoenix, who's actually my competitor now, but I still respect them as a company. They helped me get started and by giving me some real favorable terms and a semi worth of equipment.
Wow.
and didn't know how I was going to pay them. And serendipitously that summer, which was about a month or two after I got that equipment, there was a major hurricane in Panhandle, Florida, and then the rest is history. I scaled from my mom's garage to a 100-person team, and became one of the largest drying rental companies in North America. And I always worked for restoration contractors.
So you would come in as a subcontractor
Yep.
to the restoration contractor, and you
Yep.
take care of the equipment needs. So if
Yep.
I got a large loss, you'd come in, set up the desiccant, set up all the air movers, DUs, or like that.
Yep. Yeah. So there was that. That was our main core bread and
Mhm.
butter business. And then in my home market, because there wasn't obviously
Cat work all the time.
there wasn't
yeah.
cat work all the time. The large losses were, happening, but it wasn't like a daily reoccurring thing
Yep.
that you could feed off of and build like,
Yeah.
consistency around. So I wanted to stay true to my commitment to restorers. So in my local market, in my hometown, we started doing sub work for commodity claims.
Got it.
So we did mitigation, fire abatement.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up building a massive content business, and we did all that and we had 70 technicians at our peak. Doing day-to-day commodity claims. So it was just doing mitigation. So it was a sizable operation with 3,000 plus claims a year.
How many pieces of equipment do you guys have
In our fleet today?
Yeah.
Today we're about 12,000 pieces of portables.
Got it.
And then a bunch of desiccants and heat and cooling and whatnot. So that's how Kahi was birthed. It was birthed out of a need to, one, I've always been a tech operator because how I operate, we operate at a wholesale level. And
So your
so
margins are super tight.
margins are thin, but my overhead is very similar. I pay competitive wages with everyone else, and
Yep.
my rent and gas and is all the same. And so that's what drove me to technology. And so I leveraged tech to drive automations, reduce my SG&A and my COGS, and that's what kind of like kept bringing me back to the tech world. And I love the idea of tech because it's abundant, it's massively scalable. I'm kind of a big thinking kind of individual.
Yep.
And that kind of just feeds that bucket that of mine, will say. And so that's what led to Kahi. Is I wanted to create a product, one that could solve my own needs, but two that I knew I could productize. And the tracking was an MVP to a grander vision that I have for the industry that's starting to manifest itself now with monitoring, and what's going to manifest its next evolution once we move beyond monitoring and that starts to get into the marketplace.
So many people might not know what Kahi is, and I'm actually surprised because for restorers that don't use a Kahi-like technology, I think it's kind of silly not to. But what is Kahi? Like, what is the premise of Kahi? What does it exactly do? And why should a restorer use something like Kahi?
Yeah, so everyone asks me what Kahi is from it. Like, what is Kahi? What is that? So it's actually a Hawaiian word. It means one place. So there's some meaning to it. But from what do we do, at least as it is today, we automate the tracking of your fleet. We have an extremely elegant way to inventory and onboard your fleet through a photo imaging tool. So it's a really nice like scan ID plate on the equipment, scan barcode or QR code or NFC tap the beacon, pairs it, inventory it, done. So it's really elegant, and it all goes back to that same conversation I was talking about a moment ago with data integrity and data accuracy. So all the other systems out there are flawed or very onerous for the end user to ensure that they inventory their equipment right? Because they're thumbing it into an app or using a spreadsheet to upload, and they misinventory the make and model of the piece of equipment, and right out of the gate from an inventory perspective, they don't even have the right asset going into the job. So then we start to run all these other downstream processes and workflows. It's all effed right from the get-go.
So they'll take a picture like the little placard on the DU and it'll read that and it'll know
Take
what
a picture
it
of
is.
that. Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
Yeah, so we inventory it, and then once that's all set up, we have gateways and warehouses and trucks. We have a couple different styles of gateways for telematics, so with full video, AI, facial recognition, telematics functionality for all sorts of cool things around driver analytics and driver behavior, or a more simple version where it's just where's my truck and track my equipment.
Got it.
And from a very simple perspective or explanation, we know what's in the warehouse. Once equipment's loaded to a truck and out in the field, we're tracking what's on the truck. They arrive at the job site, install the equipment. The job site's created through an Albi connection or another system perhaps that we're integrated with. And then they do their work. And then when the vehicle leaves the job site, whatever equipment was left behind just automatically transfers the job, and we're tracking.
Got it.
And then there's equipment reports and notifications for loss prevention and all that good stuff. So that was like our MVP. So our minimum viable product, our first kind of go-to-market thing, and now it's evolving into the monitoring and asset intelligence and drying optimization, and we'll keep going from there.
And just to be clear, and what I found the most interesting about this, and actually wanted to pursue that before meeting you, and then let you deal with the hardware and that hard stuff. But there is no user interaction with the equipment post the onboarding. So it's onboard, scan code, everything like that, set it up.
Yep.
And then afterwards, the equipment just gets picked up and dropped off just like it normally does. And we know where it's at, basically.
Yeah. So once you're fully configured and provisioned, as we call it, the technicians are kind of removed from the equation. We are going to introduce some functionality from a mobile perspective that the technicians will start interacting with our system again, because there's some requirements on like large loss or multifamily or things like that where you want to have a little bit more granular tracking. So if one wants that more granular stuff, there's no real elegant, automated way to know, is it in 1001 versus 901 as an example. But at a macro level, we track from the civic address automatically and report on that on a macro level.
Got it. So let's dive into that solution then of this claims problem, right? How do we get consistent, reliable, predictable data into the insurance claim ecosystem so we could eliminate this BS need for fake dry logs and the probably hundreds of millions of dollars that's spent in auditing and reviewing, and ultimately it's hurting
Cost
the insurance
consultants,
carrier, right? All these consultants, like you've got the Wordlaws of the world and the Sedgwicks of the world that are now like, hey, insurance carrier, I'm going to review this and let's split the costs and stuff like that. Like, there's hundreds of millions of wastage. And what it's doing is it's pushing restoration contractor margins down. And then it's like the carriers are crying too, and I don't blame them. They're not making money. So how do we solve this? Like, what's the solution? If we had a magic wand right now and we went bippity boppity boop, how do we fix it all?
It's going to take a handful more years, but I think we're right in the middle of it. And I think we'll start to see that kind of like euphoric, as we'll call it, scenario where like things are like highly automated, extremely scalable, and we'll get, if you want, we can get into the weeds in that. But I think we're going to see that in probably 5 or less years. I hate putting numbers on things because you kind of have that cognitive bias and whatnot. But I'll put it to you this way: from a hardware perspective, we have the capability by and large. From a connectivity perspective, I think we're in a spot where we can move good chunks of data. So like the ingredients are there. Now it's really a convergence of multiple technologies coming together to create the product itself. The issue with the restoration industry is where the resto tech, or we're starting to call it, is in its extreme infancy. So, there's a lot of kind of, we'll say, startups or maybe scale ups now that are in the space, but still like the resource that it's going to take to build that product it's going to require a significant amount of millions of dollars. And so it's coming, and it'll be iterative, and that's why it's going to take a couple of years. I also think that we could see it reach the market in a quicker way if different software companies come together through APIs and integrations in a meaningful way. That seems to be a slug that hasn't changed in several years, unfortunately. So we'll see. But how does it start? So initially, from my perspective anyways, what we're looking to solve like in the next 12 months or less even is simply just looking at, what are the conditions in the chamber? What are the conditions outside? Is the HVAC system on or not? If it's on, figure out supplies and returns that are in the chamber through that, and then the size of the HVAC system. And from there, install sensors. We'll collect the rest of the data necessary. Then Kahi will run an algorithm and basically tell you, based on what's on the truck or what's available in the fleet, here's your recipe to go dry the building. That's number one. And we'll be able to tell you if that's, the most efficient second, most efficient third, most efficient, etc. drying plan. And then that's for you to decide on if you want to choose the third best versus the best. But choose whatever you want. And then from that perspective, deploy your monitoring product equipment, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, monitor its performance and make sure that you're hitting or you're maximizing the efficiency on your equipment. So you're drying that building as efficiently as possible.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be a whole suite of functionality around optimizing and notifications to ensure that you're doing that,
Yep.
both at the technician level in the field while they're there doing their work, and then at the back office from an ops perspective, ensuring that at a macro level across all projects, identifying the ones that might need some tuning or attention. Yep. So, and without getting too deep into the weeds on it, that's like the first kind of iteration that's like upon us now.
Yep.
But then I can see hopefully either with integrations or self-development, introducing geospatial scanning to the equation, that'll all start to automate additional workflow. I think augmented reality is going to enter the space down the pipe in the hopefully not too distant future. That'll then start to change the way we as restorers and inspectors and mappers look at the space.
Yep.
That'll just add that next layer of transparency and drive additional automation and workflow from an estimating, scoping, note-taking perspective. Yep. And once we kind of hit that point, my goal anyways, and my hope is that the data will be easily flowing to all stakeholders.
Yep.
Those that are paying the bills, prominently carriers,
yep.
those that are doing the work, the contractors, and frankly, the people in the building should have visibility into all of it as well, and participating yep. in all that as well. And with that, you can then start to have fact-based conversations yep. on scope, what happened, was it prudent, yep. and does this meet the standard of care, yep. etc. And then there really shouldn't be a reason to have a lot of this strife, we'll call it, mm-hmm. amongst all stakeholders. And I think my belief is, and even speaking to C-suites at the insurance carrier level, that they're hungry for that. And so I think those that kind of move in that direction, I think will start to have a pressure release on payment delays and yep. and that kind of stuff that we see. Yeah. And then conversely, I also think there's opportunity to readjust the GL mm-hmm. on your chart of accounts. Mm-hmm. You'll be able to carve out a bunch of stuff that was otherwise done by human or inefficient yes. processes, mm-hmm. which my hope is, and is one of my big burning hair on fire initiatives, is to take some of that capital revenue that's mm-hmm. coming into the business and reallocate it to the top line, which is the labor class, mm-hmm. and pay a thriving wage for the frontline technicians that are doing the work. Because I have a really, really big issue with most technicians in our industry working in poverty. Yes. And we have this State of the Union survey, and they wonder why they can't hire and retain people. Well, it's obvious. You're paying them poverty wages. Yeah. And that problem needs to be fixed. Yeah. And asking for more money, yeah, that's probably part of it. But restorers also need to reflect, as you can yep. hear in this conversation, that we have a lot of work to do ourselves internally as well. But there's a combination of the two, and I think the technicians need to get paid a proper wage, and so that they can house themselves in adequate, comfortable, good living conditions, nourish themselves properly, have a couple vacations a year, mm-hmm. save for retirement, have a decent vehicle to get to and from yeah. work, and et cetera, and kind of have a bit of a social life. You have those 5 or 6 things, yeah. Like that's and then the mitigation becomes a trade. Then yes. you can pay a career wage. Yes. And actually, I have a thesis that if we can achieve that, you'll create a feedback loop, will actually elevate the whole industry. You'll get longevity in those that just love doing that type of work. Yes. And they will get more efficient, better. I use a hockey analogy, but I use like the Gretzky, Messier. Mm-hmm. If I go back to my youth days as the Edmonton Oilers, the dynasty that in the hockey where Gretzky, he was famous for knowing where to place the puck. He was the mm-hmm. assist maker. Mm-hmm. But I use that analogy where like you start to pair up these technicians that are been working together for years and they keep sharpening their blade, and you keep investing in them, and they keep working together, and they become tradespeople, they'll actually get more efficient and driving outcomes and the work that they need to do, which will only speed up the process. And so, you know, there's opportunity there to make healthy margins still, but also deal with cost containment. So there, without getting too deep into that, we can help the carrier side, or the people paying the bill side, to like mitigate on that side in terms of just keep raising costs, but also still pay great wages, still be a profitable and viable business. So there's a lot in there, obviously, but in simple terms, that's another big thing of mine.
Yeah, I love the fact. I mean, I think the reason we bond so much is we're both aligned on propelling the restoration industry forward. And, you know, I know there may be some competitors here that are listening to this, and this is going to be a gold nugget for them. But I mean, I think now's the time for innovators within the space to double down, raise capital, and deploy it within the space. I think, like you mentioned, there's got to be this shift. Like, we have all this unnecessary bullshit going on in the industry where we have all these different layers of cost that we're adding to claims, and it could completely get thrown away. And yes, I have the same thesis. In a couple of years, we do it, get the data on the equipment, right, and the remote monitoring, and have that data. Geospatial, it either needs to be embedded, or there might be a better way to solve that problem. I think like having some sort of AI documentation tool that might involve some sort of body cams would be the way to capture things, right? Because, you know, doing the whole 3D dollhouse view may be a little unnecessary.
It's phase one.
Yeah, and people are just kind of copying each other instead of like really innovating.
It's becoming commoditized.
So that's 2. 3, I think we have the labor clock in and clock outs, and we have the equipment. And at the end of the day, there's no reason why we should be writing stuff in Xactimate, in my opinion. I know obviously I'm an Xactimate certified trainer, not, you know, supposed to talk bad and blah, blah, blah. But like mitigation, even in Xactimate, it's all time and material just built into these assumptions, right? So it's like we can automate the billing process. Like, we know how many pieces of equipment were there. We know how much labor we actually spent there. So now we eliminate the whole need for, hey, let's go sit here and fight over these line items. The 4th thing that we need to do is shift the leverage, the financial leverage within the ecosystem. That's what we're trying to solve with AlbiPay, right? This whole like, let's sign a work authorization and pray down to the carriers won't work. As restorers, we won't have the power to change anything if that's the case. And I do think there's a fintech component to kind of shift those market dynamics. And if we can empower the homeowner more, it can give us leverage there. At the end of the day, you hit the nail on the head. I think if we do all of this, and if technology advances where it should advance, our technicians become technicians. Our technicians are not technicians now.
Craftsmen, actually.
They're laborers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like they're going in there and like ripping stuff out and such, which is great. They're going in there and doing these certain things, but it's like we could shift it to where they're actually like technical people installing mostly technology, i.e. equipment, drying in place, which is elevating the entire industry. We make a heck of a lot more money on equipment than we do on the labor, right? So then we can shift that, and that's how you get people, right? Like crane operators make $150 an hour. Why? Because they operate something that's very technical.
Yep.
So I do, you know, the plane lands there, and I think it's a win-win for everybody. You know, restoration business owners, EBITDA will not be affected. They'll all make the profits that they're making, and, you know, everybody else in the company. The whole, hey, let's spend all this time, and technicians don't like wasting time either, ripping stuff up or doing unnecessary stuff. Their job would be a lot easier if they don't have to click through the UI screens, if they don't have to do all that crappy demo, if they 100%. You know, have just pieces of equipment that they're installing, you know?
There's many tentacles, if you will, to the technology equation for sure. The mitigation technician role is the craftsman of the industry, needs to become the craftsman of the industry. The reorganization of the back office needs to occur. You need to really reduce the SG&A component of the business and drive some efficiency in the COG items as well, for sure. I have contentious issues around T&M. Like, it makes sense to a certain degree at scale when you're dealing with massive losses. I get it for that arena, but the bulk of work are commodity claims. So In that sphere, these smaller jobs, sub 20 grand, 30 grand, whatever it is, T&M is a little bit of a different scenario because you get rewarded for mediocrity. So the shitter you are, the more you make in the T&M process. So I have some issue with that.
So what I mean by T&M, like if you really look at the components of Xactimate, it's also T&M, meaning an algorithm
It's built in
that
productivity
takes in-
rates.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So based on what happened and based on data of what happened in the loss, justifying everything that happened, justifying the equipment, but yes, lump summing it, or like not necessarily presenting it in a line item by line item fashion where it's like, here's what it is. And it could be like matrix driven or algorithm driven or something like that comes up with that specific price.
Yeah. I'm not bent on one way or the other, truthfully. I get a little bit, when incentives aren't aligned, that's when I start to have problems with it, is all I'll say.
Got it.
And so I've always faced that problem because I was always a T&M shop in my commodity work. And it was disheartening because, case in point, I remember having a conversation with a big client of ours, and they're like, you guys need to look at your hourlies. I'm like, why? Well, you're $2 an hour more expensive than so and so. I'm like, okay, fine. Why don't you look at 20 jobs that you've been giving them and look at 20 jobs you've been giving us, and then look at your margins and tell me who's more expensive. And kudos to him, because we had a really great relationship. They did the work, and they came back to me. He's like, holy shit, we're making an extra 15 points off of you, even though you're a couple of dollars more expensive. I'm like, exactly. So,
but that's the other thing I want to empower restorers is stop just following the average pricing because there's average restorers that should be used for average losses. There's sub-average restorers that should be used for sub-average losses, and then there's premium restorers that should be used for premium.
That's an
losses,
interesting concept,
right?
Yeah.
Like same with plumbers. Like I can go in and I don't really care about the customer service, blah blah blah. I'll get my sump pump swapped for $500.
Yeah.
With a guy that comes in with a beat up truck, and I'll pay him cash, right? That I can also go and call a local plumber that will do it for $1,000, and then I can call the larger scale plumbing organization that will do that same thing for $2,000, right? And I think there should be that because like different organizations are different, or like the premium restorers should find premium customers so that way they could pay even more premium wages for the cream of the crop. Like I get it, we have to uplift the technicians overall, but like you should have like the Amazons of restoration or the Googles of restoration, but then there's also like you talk about and there's impoverished customers, and there's a segment of the market that, okay, fine, cut out all the bells and whistles, cut out the hospitality and stuff like that, just do bare minimum work to save my property,
tear the stuff out, clean the stuff up, and whatever.
The house is the most important investment of every person, and the investments vary from $100,000 investment to multi-million-dollar investment. Yet the service the service pricing of restoration is the same.
Yeah, it leads me to that whole concept, and it kind of brings me into this idea I had years ago that it may come. I'm not saying I'm going to do it. Who knows? But there is an arms race for first notice of loss, and you know what I mean by that, right? First notice of loss. So Mrs. Jones has a flood.
Yep.
First notice of loss is whoever Mrs. Jones contacts.
Yeah.
So is it the carrier, and then they feed it through their the managed program, or does it go through Google, or does it go to a plumber? Or who gets the first notice of loss? Right. So there's an arms race to get first notice of loss.
Yeah.
We'll see, but like I think the carriers are actively working on process and whatever we'll call it, just process for this conversation to get it all the time.
I'm actually shocked by.
I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. I think the carriers are in a unique position where I don't know if they'll win that battle because of
could be written right in the policy.
Local it is.
Could be written right in the policy.
Could be. And when you see it here and there. But I think the carriers would be wiser to look elsewhere for efficiencies. There could be some other stuff like higher deductibles and finance deductibles, opportunities there. The carriers also need to look in and eliminate all this multiple levels of BS that happens there.
Yeah.
I also think like if you talk about technology, Like, bro, carriers are still in DOS.
Oh, yeah,
You
it's
go to a
crazy.
State Farm office to go get a policy written, you got a black and green freaking screen right
crazy.
now in 2025.
That's crazy.
Like,
They should send Doge over there.
yeah. And it's like, and you know, Watley, obviously you and I both know him and such. He's been trying to sell it to the carriers for the longest time ever. But it's like, and then, if you want to peel the onion back, and we don't have too much time, but like, we integrated with Xactimate, and there's certain NDAs and stuff like that in place. But like, we integrate with Xactimate and Exact Analysis. We know a lot about how those systems work. They're like 2 decades behind.
They have a lot of technical debt.
Yeah, and then we also know, you know, the two products that consume data for them, right? Restoration Manager and NextGear Solutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those products are so like their data sure there's a database, but they're so far behind on the usability to where they're not able to capture the data from the field. And that's not the bad part. The bad part is then that data is being used and algorithms are being thrown on top of it to make assumptions that then go back to the carriers to underwrite risk, right? And so on and so forth. So it's like what the carriers don't understand is that they want claims data, but claims data is the work of the contractor. And because they have faulty claims data, and I see this all the time. I mean, we have a 60% closing rate against NextGear Solutions clients. We pull off people off of Dash all the time. We do data imports and we look at the data and we're like, there's not much here, right?
Wow.
Like it just like there's not even like the QuickBooks connection doesn't even work to where there's very limited financial data. All the COGS data is off. Like, yeah, you all you've really got with like almost high certainty is a customer name, an address, and a phone number. Like that's it. Everything else is so flawed because people don't use it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now the entire ecosystem is saying, ooh, we have this data. And I remember I played that card too when I came in. Oh, Dash took the data of the carrier of the contractors selling it to the carriers. And that was like my thesis for the longest time ever. And now that I like became more educated on it, it's like, actually, the problem isn't that the contractor is getting screwed over because the data is getting sent to the carrier. The problem is that data is so bad and the carrier's making these assumptions based off of these data sets.
Is that actually, I'm a little ignorant in that sphere, we'll call it. So I don't know. Is that like legit? What's going on?
I mean, the whole goal with, again, CoreLogic and Verisk, create data sets, and then those data sets are then used. I mean, it's public knowledge.
Do we know like that's actually what's being done? Like they're collecting data from the contractor's CRM job management tool and leveraging that to drive downstream.
Well, I would
analysis?
say, so the first thing is I would say that's implied.
Is it?
I don't necessarily, like I've never talked to a CoreLogic executive or a Verisk executive that told me specifically, but I know they have data sets. Those data sets are material data combined with contractor data. They release studies that include contractor data. I don't know how else they would gather that data.
I don't know for certain, to be honest with you. Seriously, I don't. Part of me wants to say like I'm surprised that that's actually the case, because I feel they're not that sophisticated, not to insult them. But maybe they are. I don't know. That's risky business. I thought they would. Would have assumed that they would have known that to what you're saying would confirm what you're saying in a sense that they understand the data is probably not so great either. I don't know.
So, and not to poke holes into their understanding, but these insurance executives consider a customer's first and last name and an address as PII, where you and I can go on Google and find that information out, right? So I don't know. I mean, I think you would expect them to know more. You would expect more progress. You would expect somebody like Verisk to purchase a solution like Matterport, for example, or ... But when you look at the entire ecosystem and then you just fundamentally look at how the data is being captured, there is no world-class tool that they have acquired or partnered with or worked with that gives them a true picture of the story across all fronts.
Data sharing is definitely an issue right now.
Yeah, and all of that's broken. Like even Home Depot's like cataloging system, like we've dabbled into that API, like that's all messed up, right? And I as a contractor can go to the bid room and get, you know, different pricing and stuff like that. Like there is no standardization of data within the restoration industry on which we can provide services to mortgagees, to insurance carriers and such. Yet, I don't know what specific data is in those data set. Well, I do know, but
you're selling for me, buddy.
What?
I said you're selling for me right
Yeah.
now.
but right, I do know for a fact that decisions are being made on said data, on broken data, including those dry logs. Like fundamentally, we know one thing, right? My PDF dry log that has BS in it that I send to the third-party reviewer, that data is being used to evaluate whether or not we should pay for this claim.
100% that.
And that data is broken.
Yeah.
Right? So that's like a huge fundamental problem. And yeah, I mean, I get it. Contractors are getting squeezed, not getting paid on time, turnaround receivables, and contractors are at fault because they're not efficient. There's scarcity mindset. There's a lot of work to be done, and I'm like on that mission to fix the contractors. But like carriers, like don't cry about your negative bottom lines because woe is me, because you know the wildfires are coming in and all this stuff. It's like, no, you guys have on the carrier side, there is so much like good boys club, red tape, just bad efficiencies that I think need to be fixed. And I'll work with the contractors. That's my ethos. That's who I am. We'll fix our side with or without the carriers. I know for a fact the restoration industry will survive. It will thrive. We will get to that point where the technician thrives, right? And the carriers will have to figure out their own thing, however they figure it out.
I think they will. I think based on conversation, they definitely have technical debt on their own, and I think the InsurTech side of the industry is definitely exploding too. Yep. I think they're evolving too. I think we'll see some progress there.
Yeah. The nice part about the restoration industry is very fragmented, so evolution can actually happen very quickly because it's just mass small stakeholders, whereas the insurance industry is very consolidated and larger structured organizations that are really hard to, it's really hard to get a State Farm to change.
I'm seeing a shift in the contracting side, but like a lot of the restorers that have been in the industry for, you know, a decade plus, they're very, they have a lot of trepidation to making, you know, purchases in the realm of tech, you know, cost conscious. They're like, it's, you know what I'm saying, right?
1,000%.
So, and slow to adopt, and it's getting better, but still slow to adopt. So it's a slug from that perspective. And you say it all the time. It's super interesting to me that single digit percentile of the industry actually participates at our
events.
Restoration Association event, which is unfortunate, I'll say, leave it at that. But we need to do a better job on pulling those people in. But on the flip side, somewhere to the tune of 60% of the industry are solopreneur restorers, or maybe a couple few vans, and maybe they just can't afford to you know, fly to another state for
they
4 or
could
5
afford
days.
it, dude. I've got startup restoration contractors
not afford it from a financial perspective, but afford to like actually like leave their operation for like 4 or 5 days, which is kind of mind-boggling. I don't know if that's actually true. That's just more of a perception.
No, it's a mindset thing.
It's a mindset, absolutely.
Yeah, like we can't talk about affordability. I mean, there's people that pay, you know, like there's franchises that are growing like weeds, and there's $150,000 to $200,000 upfront, you know, sign up for the territory kind of thing. Like there's capital out there. It's a commodity. It's just, I think what you're pointing to is the scarcity mindset of the restorer, and the fact that these people come from nothing and then start making a little bit and they're afraid of losing that.
Yeah. And so how do you overcome that? So there's that element of the industry from a velocity perspective that's kind of slowing things down. Obviously the tech platforms need to do a better job on the ones that are strategically can benefit this conversation we're talking about, working together. Like that stuff needs to happen. And the only way I see that happening is either the founders of the entities need to just commit to doing it, or in conjunction, the users of those platforms need to start being louder and asking for it. And like, but I also, and just in talking with so many restorers, a lot of our users, you know, they'll ask for basic integrations, but they still don't I don't know if this, maybe they're just not saying it. I'm making a bit of an assumption here, but like they don't share some of the vision that we have, perhaps. And so because of that, they're not asking.
100%.
Maybe. I don't know for certainty, but
Yeah.
needless to say, like there needs to be data share has to happen to see a more accelerated evolution. Is maybe
But it's
the way to say
exciting.
it.
Now's
It
the
is
time to do it.
We're in it. We're
Yeah.
in it. It's coming one way or another. It's coming. And I think, you know, you guys are doing a great job in scaling at the Alibi side, and we're making a dent. Not as fast as I'd like it to be, but we're making a dent, and others are too. So we'll see.
Thanks, man. Well, we're coming up on time here,
Yeah.
but where can people find you if they're so called to reach out to you, maybe have a deeper conversation on some of these topics?
Well, I'm active on Facebook and LinkedIn, so you can just find me there. So just search Kevin Dooley, and you'll probably find me.
Awesome.
Search Kahi, you'll find me that way, I'm sure. Kahi.io is our website, and yeah.
Cool, man. Well, thanks so much for coming out to our
thanks for having me,
Evolve
buddy.
event and
was good.
podcasting it up.
A
here.
great job on the event too, by the way.
Thanks, man.
Put on a really good show.
Really appreciate it.
Restorers, you should be attending this. There's a lot of golden nuggets here to help scale your restoration business, your mindset as well. It'll add 10x value to your operation. So crack open your credit card and sign up for the next one.
Thanks.
And he didn't ask me to say that, by the way.
Totally did not, but thank you. Appreciate your blessing, man.
Yeah, buddy.